You know what's scarier than someone yelling at you? Someone who doesn't. Someone who speaks softly while your whole world tilts. Because if they're calm, it means they've already decided. Tough. And if they've already decided, there's nothing you can do to charm your way back in. That's why people can't stop talking about the gate moment. Not because a gate is dramatic, but because gates are the thing you only notice when you're on the wrong side of them. Picture this. You pull up expecting the old rhythm, the old muscle memory, the old we're still connected no matter what. Maybe you even practice your face in the car. That careful half smile that says, I'm friendly, but I'm also in control. You step out, you walk up, and then before you can even knock, before you can even say a name, someone is already there. Not the person you expected. A man you don't recognize. Not angry. Not puffed up. Not trying to win a scene. Just present, like he's been standing there a long time. Like he's been waiting for this moment in a way you don't understand yet. And he says something that doesn't sound dramatic at all. Something almost polite. But the meaning underneath it? It's a guillotine. Hey, she's not available. And right there, right in the driveway, with the sun too bright and the air too still, you feel they just didn't let you in. And that's what fans are swirling around right now. This rumor, this whisper, this alleged moment where Robyn shows up and realizes the rules changed without her. But I don't want to tell this like gossip. I want to tell it like the thing it really is. A psychology story, a power story. A story about what happens when someone who's always had access meets a boundary that doesn't care about their history. Because if you've ever been the one who kept the peace, if you've ever swallowed your words because it was easier, if you've ever watched a room bend around one person's emotions and thought, why am I the one doing all the adapting? Then you already understand why a closed gate can feel like the loudest sentence in the world. Here's the part people miss. This isn't just about Robyn and Janelle. This is about the invisible contracts families make. The unspoken agreements like, we'll always answer the phone. We'll always show up, we'll always give you access because we always have. And sometimes you don't realize you've been living under one of those contracts until someone quietly tears it up. And in this story, Janelle is the one who finally stops paying for everyone else's comfort. Because for years, Janelle played a role a lot of us recognize. The steady one, the practical one, the one who could be disappointed and still make dinner, the one who could feel sidelined and still show up, the one who could watch the emotional budget of the family get spent in one direction and tell herself, it's fine. I'm fine. I don't need that much. But needing a not that mushy is still needing. And if you don't get it long enough, something changes in you. Not into rage, not into drama, into clarity. And clarity is dangerous for people who benefited from your flexibility. Because when you finally see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You stop negotiating with the fantasy. You stop bargaining with the past. You stop trying to be understood by people who liked you better when you were quiet. You start doing something that feels almost rude at first. You start acting like your piece matters. So let's talk about the dynamic fans have watched for years, without pretending we know every private detail. From the outside, it often looked like the emotional center of gravity shifted. Attention shifted, resources shifted, time shifted. And the person who got blamed for the shift depended on who you were watching through. But the experience many viewers describe is the same. A family that was supposed to be balanced started to feel lopsided. And lopsided families don't break all at once. They erode, slowly, quietly, through 1,000 tiny moments that don't make good TV. A birthday where someone doesn't show, a text left on read. A plan changed last minute because somebody else needs you something. A conversation where you feel yourself minimizing again. And one day you realize you don't even know what you want anymore. Because you've trained yourself not to want things that won't be given. And that's the real heartbreak, not the big fights, the self-erasure. And then there's the weirdest part. Even after you leave, the ghost of the old system still tries to run your life. Because a leaving isn't just walking out. Leaving is separating your nervous system from a pattern. Leaving is resisting the urge to explain yourself to people who weren't listening anyway. Leaving is learning that you're allowed to say no without giving a speech. And the first time you do it, it feels like you're doing something wrong. Like you're the villain. Like you're selfish. Like you owe them more softness, so they don't feel your boundary as an insult. So imagine Janelle in a new chapter. Whatever that looks like in reality, we're talking about the energy shift fans believe they're seeing a new home, or at least a new emotional home. A space that doesn't feel like a waiting room. A space that doesn't require her to audition for belonging. And then, this is where the new man enters the conversation. Because whether there is literally a new partner or not, the symbol is powerful. A presence beside her that doesn't come from the old system. Someone who doesn't have nostalgia chains. Someone who doesn't owe the past politeness. Someone who can look at the situation and say the simplest thing in the world. This doesn't work for us. Not because he's controlling, but because he's not conditioned. He isn't trained to keep the peace with people who never kept it for Janelle, and that, right there, is why this alleged gate moment hits so hard. Because it's not a screaming match between ex-family members, it's not a gotcha, it's not a humiliation ritual. It's a boundary delivered by someone who doesn't tremble while saying it. And when you meet that kind of boundary, you can't argue with it. There's no opening. There's no emotional hook to grab onto. No, a maybe if I say it differently. No, a maybe if I cry. No, a maybe if I remind them of the old days. Because the old days are exactly what that boundary is protecting them from. Now, imagine being Robyn in that moment. Again, speaking in the emotional logic of the story people are reacting to. If you've spent years in a system where access was assumed, where showing up meant you'd be let in, where you could walk into spaces because you were part of the structure, then a closed gate isn't just inconvenience, it's identity shock. It's the sudden realization that you don't have the role you thought you had anymore, and the brain hates that. The brain will scramble for explanations. She's being petty, he's being rude. This is unfair, this is out of character. But the real explanation is the one that stings. You're not the center of this anymore, and here's the twist that makes it even sharper. The alleged gate moment isn't framed as cruelty, it's framed as calm. And calm is what tells your body this is real, because anger looks temporary. Anger looks negotiable. Calm looks final. Calm says, I slept on this. I chose this. I'm not confused. And the person on the other side of calm? They start to panic because there's no crack to wedge into. So what do you do when you're standing outside a gate and the person inside won't perform the emotional dance with you? You can't escalate because then you look unhinged. You can't cry because crying won't buy entry. You can't charm because charm only works when the other person wants to be charmed. You can't invoke family because the word of family suddenly feels like a key that doesn't fit the lock anymore. And I think that's why people keep replaying this in their mind. Because we've all had a version of that moment. The moment you realize you don't have access to someone the way you used to. The moment you learn you're not entitled to their energy anymore. And whether you're the person outside the gate or the person finally closing it, it hurts. Because it forces you to face a truth you can't soften with nostalgia. Love that requires you to shrink isn't love. It's survival, and survival is exhausting. Now, let's slow down and make this personal, because that's where the story becomes dangerous, in a good way. Have you ever been in a friendship where you were always the understanding one? You were always the one who gave them grace. You were always the one who explained their behavior to other people. You were always the one who said, that's just how they are. And then one day you didn't do it. You didn't explain them. You didn't soothe the room. You didn't open the door. And suddenly everyone acted like you were the problem. Like your boundary was an attack. Like your silence was violence. That's what happens when people get used to your flexibility. They stop seeing it as kindness. They see it as the normal order of the world. So the day you change, they call it betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's you returning to yourself, and that's the heartbeat of this whole alleged moment. not romance, not drama. Restoration. Because the anew man, whether literal or symbolic, represents something that didn't exist in the old dynamic. A witness, a protector. A person who sees the pattern and doesn't rationalize it away. A person who doesn't say, just let it go. A person who says, why is it always you letting it go? And if you've never had someone say that to you, you don't realize how emotional it is. It's like someone finally took your invisible bruises seriously. Now here's where the story gets even more intense. Because a closed gate isn't just about Robyn. It's also a message aimed at the system Robyn came from. The same system that trained everyone to believe the family could stretch forever without snapping. The same system that taught women to compete quietly for crumbs of attention while pretending it was unity. But the same system that made a loyalty sound noble when sometimes it was just compliance. And if that gate moment happened the way people describe, it didn't just shut Robyn out. It shut a whole era out. It said, the old rules don't apply here. It said, you don't get to walk into my life because you used to be adjacent to it. It said, history doesn't automatically earn you access. And if you're Kody, if you're the person who was once the axis of everything, imagine hearing about that. Imagine realizing the women you once expected to orbit you now have homes, relationships, and lives where your name doesn't unlock the door. That's a different kind of loss? Not. Nevers. Not I miss you. More like I can't reach you. And for someone used to being able to reach, that's terrifying. Because control doesn't always look like shouting orders. Sometimes control looks like assuming availability, assuming entry, assuming the world still rotates around your schedule. So when someone builds a life where you can't assume those things, it's like they removed the stage you used to perform on. And that's where the second layer of tension comes in. If Robyn felt shut out, what happens next? Does she tell Kody? Does she downplay it? Does she frame it like an insult? Does she frame it like betrayal? Does she frame it like, can you believe how they treated me? Because if she does, that could light a fuse. And the people who get caught in the blast are rarely the ones holding the matches. It's the kids. It's the awkward family events. It's the mutual connections who didn't ask for this. It's everyone who still has to live in the fallout while adults rewrite the rules. And that's why this isn't a simple a Team Janelle or a Team Robyn story. It's deeper. It's what do you owe people who were part of your past? When the past was painful? What do boundaries look like when history is complicated? And here's a question that will split people right down the middle. If someone contributed to the worst years of your life, whether intentionally or unintentionally, do they still deserve access to the best years? Because that's what this gate symbolizes. Not punishment, not prioritization. And I can already hear two kinds of viewers arguing. One group says, that's petty. They're still family. The other group says, family doesn't mean unlimited entry. So let's keep going, because the most interesting part of this story isn't the gate. It's what the gate forces everyone to admit, that the together version of this family might already be dead, and what's left are individuals trying to figure out what love means without the structure that once defined them. And for Janelle, the biggest twist isn't that she found someone new. It's that she found herself again. And once you find yourself, you stop reopening doors that cost you your peace. If that driveway moment was real, even in spirit, even in the way fans describe it, then the next few minutes matter more than the gate itself. Because the gate is the first to know. What comes after is the test. Does the person outside respect the no? Or do they try to turn it into a conversation? Because this is where boundaries either become real or become performance. A boundary isn't proven by saying a no. It's proven by what you do when someone doesn't like the no. So imagine Robyn standing there, hand hovering like she might knock anyway. Maybe she laughs a little because laughter is what people do when they're trying to pretend they're not embarrassed. Maybe she says, I just want to talk. That phrase sounds harmless, but it's often a trap. What you just want to talk usually means, I want to talk until I get what I came for. And if the man at the gate, again, This symbol of the new chapter doesn't take the bait. He might say something that feels even colder because it's normal. Now's not a good time. Not angry, not emotional, just closed. And then comes the moment nobody wants to be in, the moment where you have to decide whether you'll respect someone's boundary or force them to reinforce it. Because if you push, the boundary gets louder. If you linger, you make it awkward. If you insist, you make yourself the problem. So what do? You turn back to your car and you feel that burning behind your eyes, not just from rejection, from displacement. From realizing you're not sure who you are in this story anymore, because for years, Robyn was seen, fairly or unfairly, as someone who had influence, someone who could shape outcomes, someone who wasn't just participating in the family, but steering it. And when you go from a steering it to standing outside a gate, your ego doesn't just get bruised, it gets reorganized. That's why people act weird after moments like this. They rewrite the story immediately because the truth feels too exposed, they tell themselves. He was rude. She's bitter. They're trying to punish me. Because if the truth is simply, I don't have access anymore, then you have to face a painful question. Did I ever have real connection? Or did I only have proximity to power? And that question eats people alive. Now, let's flip to Janelle's side. Because if you've ever been the one who finally put up a boundary, you know the part nobody talks about. It doesn't feel victorious. It feels nauseating because you're not used to being that person. You're used to being the one who smooths it over. You're used to being the one who keeps things civil, even when you're bleeding inside. So when someone is at your gate and you don't let them in, you might feel guilty for a second. Not because you're wrong, because you're conditioned. Conditioned to believe that your comfort is less important than everyone else's convenience. So if Janelle really stayed calm, like people claim, if she really let someone else handle it, that's not weakness. That's evolution. It's her refusing to do emotional labor for a dynamic that drained her. It's her saying, I'm not the receptionist of my own life anymore, and that a new mana factor matters here in a way people might not expect. Because when you've been in a long relationship system where your boundaries were constantly negotiated, where your needs were constantly compared, your nervous system gets trained to expect pushback. So, even when you want to say no, you brace for the argument. But if someone else steps in, someone who doesn't have the old fear, your body learns something new. Oh, we can be safe without a fight. Oh, we can say no without begging to be understood. Oh, we can protect our peace without performing cruelty. That's healing. Not fireworks. Not revenge. Healing. And healing is the least a TV dramatic thing in the world, which is why it looks so dramatic when you've only ever seen chaos. Now here's the thing that makes this story an emotional grenade. If Robyn was denied entry, it suggests a boundary wasn't just spoken in private, it became physical. And physical boundaries are harder to spin. You can't interpret it a closed gate. It's either open or it's not. And when a boundary becomes physical, it means the person inside is done negotiating. They've reached the point where they know words get twisted. So they use structures instead. Gates, structures instead. Gates. Locks, schedules, distance. Not to be cruel, to be clear. And clarity is the one thing that ruins old manipulation patterns. Because manipulation needs fog. Manipulation needs a maybe. Manipulation needs we'll see. Manipulation needs you to doubt yourself. But a gate? A gate says, there is no maybe. So if we zoom out, what does this alleged moment actually communicate to the audience? It says the plural of family isn't the main character anymore. The women are. Their autonomy is. Their boundaries are. Their post system identity is. And that's why it feels like an ending, even if the cameras keep rolling. Because the emotional center moved. The story used to be, how do we keep this together? Now the story is, what do I become after I stop trying? And that's a terrifying story if you've built your identity on being needed. Because a lot of people don't realize they're addicted to being needed until they're no longer needed. And that addiction shows up as resentment, control, guilt trips, concern, and constant re-entry attempts. So if Robyn felt shut out, the next logical step in a lot of these dynamics is try a different door. Call someone else, text, bring in a third party. Create urgency. Because boundaries are easiest to break when you can make them feel like emergencies. So the question becomes, did someone try to turn this into a crisis? Did someone try to recruit Kody? But here's the part that might shock you. The strongest boundaries don't react to leverage. They let people be mad. They let people misunderstand. They let people tell their version. They don't chase the narrative. They protect the nervous system. And if Janelle is really in that era, if she's really done chasing approval, then the gate moment is only the beginning. Because once you've closed one door, you start noticing how many doors you used to leave cracked open out of guilt. And you begin closing them too. Not because you hate people. Because you love yourself enough to stop bleeding for free. Now, if you're watching this as a viewer, it triggers something uncomfortable. Because it forces you to pick a principle. Do you believe a family means permanent access? Or do you believe a family means mutual respect, meaning access can change if respect disappears? That debate is going to explode in the comments, and I want to hear it. If someone from your past showed up at your door after years of pain, do you let them in because of history? Or do you protect the peace you fought to build? And there's another debate hiding underneath that one. Is it empowering for a new Mana to enforce the boundary? Or should Janelle be the one to say it herself? Because some people will say, he's controlling. Others will say, he's supportive. He's doing what she's been forced to do alone for decades. And the truth might be messy, because support can look like stepping in. But it can also look like stepping back. And the difference is consent. If she asked for that protection, it's partnership. If she didn't, it's control. But here's what makes fans read this as partnership. The alleged calmness, the lack of spectacle. The way it wasn't framed as dominance, but as a simple rule. This home isn't a public hallway anymore. Now, let's talk about Robyn's emotional experience again, because it's important. People tend to turn her into a cartoon villain or a helpless victim. Neither is fair. If you've ever been in a role where you were the chosen one, the one the system favored, you can still be hurt when the system collapses. You can still be confused. You can still be grieving. But grief doesn't entitle you to access. And that's the brutal lesson of adulthood. You can feel real pain and still not be welcomed into someone else's sanctuary. So when fans say, when shut out, the interesting part isn't celebration. It's the moral discomfort. Because it raises a final question that nobody wants to say out loud. When you were part of a system that hurt other people, whether you meant to be or not, what do you do when those people stop inviting you into their healing? Do you accept it? Or do you demand forgiveness on your timeline? And that's where this story becomes a mirror. Because most of us aren't in a reality TV family. But we've all been in some version of a collapsing structure. A friend group that changed. A marriage that turned into a negotiation. A workplace that favored one person and drained everyone else. A family where one sibling's emotions ran the entire house. And when you finally leave that structure, you learn something that makes you both sad and free. Some people don't miss you. They miss what you allowed. So the gate isn't just about Robyn being denied. It's about the end of allowance. And once allowance ends, everything changes. Now the tension ramps up because there's still one person we haven't put in the driveway yet, Kody. Because if Kody hears about this gate moment, if he hears that someone else stood between Robyn and access, what does that do to his identity? Does he see it as disrespect? Does he see it as betrayal? Does he see it as another man taking control? Because if so, this stops being a family boundary story and becomes an ego collision story. And ego collisions don't stay quiet. They look for stages. They look for cameras. They look for cameras. They look for allies. They look for someone to blame. So if you think the gate was the ending, watch what happens when the wrong person decides it's the beginning. Because the next chapter isn't about who got shut out. It's about who tries to force their way back in. Let's imagine the call that happens later. Not on camera, not with dramatic music, Just that familiar phone buzz that makes your stomach drop before you even pick up, because you already know the tone. You already know the pattern. The voice that calls not to understand, but to reassert. And if you've lived in this kind of dynamic, you know exactly how it starts. Not with a "how are you?" With a subtle accusation disguised as confusion. So, what was that? Or worse, I heard something really upsetting. Because I heardy is a weapon. It means they're already building a case. Now here's what a lot of people don't understand about boundaries. The first boundary is the hardest. The second is easier. The third is when everyone realizes you're serious. So if Kody, or anyone, calls expecting Janelle to explain, to soothe, to justify, to apologize for having a life, and she doesn't, that's the real ending. Because the old system survived on her participation, on her willingness to stay reasonable while everyone else stayed reactive, on her being the grown-up in the room. So if she refuses to step into the old role, the system can't reboot. It can only rage. And rage is a sign of withdrawal. Withdrawal from control. Withdrawal from access. Withdrawal from the comforting idea that other people are always available to you. So imagine Janelle listening quiet, not defensive, not emotional. And then she says something that would make certain people lose their minds. I'm not doing this. That's it. 4 words that end entire eras. I'm not doing this. Because what does "this" mean? It means the circular arguments, it means the blame games, it means the endless relitigation of the past. It means the expectation that her peace is negotiable. It means the idea that she has to remain emotionally reachable to people who weren't emotionally safe. Now, if you're the person on the other end of the line, that's unbearable, because you can't fight a wall. You can only exhaust yourself against it. And that's why people escalate. They throw out old scripts. After everything we've been through, we're still family. You're being influenced. You've changed. And "you've changed" is always funny because yes, that's the point. But then comes the most toxic line of all, the one that sounds moral but is actually just control. "This isn't like you." Translation: come back to the version of you I could manage. And if Janelle's new chapter is real, she doesn't argue. She doesn't defend. She doesn't list grievances. She doesn't beg to be seen. She just ends the conversation. And that quiet ending feels violent to people who relied on your endless explanation. Now, let's be honest. Some viewers will say, "That's cold." But cold isn't always cruel. Sometimes cold is what happens when someone stops burning themselves to keep you warm. And here's the emotional peak of this whole story. Janelle's boundary doesn't punish Robyn. It doesn't punish Kody. It protects Janelle. And protection is what she didn't have for a long time, emotionally, structurally, financially, whatever combination you believe happened. Protection is the thing you don't miss until you finally have it. Which brings us back to that alleged man at the gate. The reason the new man takes control. Idea goes viral is because it touches a fantasy a lot of people have. What if someone finally stood up for me? What if someone finally said a no, not anymore, without shaking? What if someone saw me as worth protecting, not worth managing? Because that's what partnership is supposed to feel like, not possession, not dominance. Safety. So if Janelle is experiencing any version of that, whether it's a literal new relationship or simply a new internal backbone, then the gate moment is symbolic either way. It's the first time the boundary wasn't just emotional, it was enforced. And enforcement is where the story stops being about feelings and starts being about reality. Because feelings are easy to debate. Reality is harder. A gate is reality. A gate is reality. A no is reality. A closed door is reality. Now, the last piece, because a good story doesn't end with the gate, it ends with what the gate represents, a question. A painful, liberating question. What happens after the dream ends? Not the dream of plural marriage for them specifically. The dream all of us have at some point. The dream that if we just try harder, the structure will finally love us back. The dream that if we stay patient, the imbalance will correct itself. The dream that if we swallow enough, the system will reward us. It won't. Systems don't reward the quiet ones. They consume them, and then they call it loyalty. So when Janelle closes the gate, literally or metaphorically, she's answering that question. Life after the dream is not a smaller version of the old life. It's not scraps. It's not a partial connection that keeps you bleeding. Life after the dream is choosing something entirely new. A home where you don't flinch when a phone rings. A peace that doesn't require permission. A love that doesn't demand self-erasure. And if that's the era she's in, then the most dramatic thing she could do isn't scream. It's stay calm. It's stop explaining. It's build a life so solid that the past can't enter without knocking, and even then the answer might be no. Now, I want to end this with something that matters more than the gossip. Have you ever had to shut a door on someone you once considered a family? And when you did it, did you feel powerful or did you feel guilty? Because guilt is what happens when your boundary collides with someone else's entitlement. So here are 2 questions I genuinely want you to argue about in the comments. If someone shows up at your door after years of imbalance, do you let them in for closure? Or do you protect your peace and keep the door shut? And second, if you were Robyn in that driveway, would you accept the boundary or would you feel betrayed by it? Because the answer says a lot about how you see love, as access or as respect. And maybe that's why a simple closed gate can feel like the final scene of an entire era. Not because it's dramatic, because it's honest, because it's the first time someone said, without yelling, without begging, without performing, this is my life now. And you don't get to walk into it just because you used to.